Hi everyone and welcome to the 35th episode of Japanese Phonetics by Dogen. In this episode we'll be looking at the IPA Vowel Chart and the 5 Japanese vowels. I'd like to preface things with a quote from J. Noguchi. Noguchi, citing Todaka, says that American English speakers utilize a greater vowel space than Japanese speakers. We can imply from this statement that American English speakers already have the articulatory flexibility necessary for saying the 5 Japanese vowels. Thus, when it comes to vowels, I believe that informed shadowing as opposed to a back and forth A to B comparison is the more effective approach for the majority of the users of this program. We'll be doing a bit of both in this lesson, but concentrating more on the former. Okay, with that out of the way, let's move on to the IPA vowel chart. The IPA, which stands for International Phonetic Alphabet, is a set of symbols used to accurately represent the pronunciation of any word in any language. So unlike English letters and some Japanese letters, IPA symbols always represent only one sound. This symbol, for example, represents a TH sound. This symbol, on the other hand, represents an alveolar tap, like the Japanese R. It doesn't matter the word or language. With IPA symbols, you can accurately spell it. Naturally, there are symbols for vowels as well, and these are often shown within the IPA Vowel Chart, a graphic designed to help with visualization. This is the chart, downloaded directly from the International Phonetic Association. It's meant to represent the mouth when viewed from the side, with the teeth on the left side and the throat on the right side. A vowel's location on the chart is determined by the highest point of the tongue when the vowel is pronounced. For example, in the top left corner, we have the vowel E. As you can tell, when we say E, our tongue is high and forward in our mouth. E, E. Thus, E is a high front vowel. It's also considered a closed vowel, as the jaw is relatively closed when we say it. E, E. On the other hand, at the bottom right corner of the chart, we have the vowel A. When saying A, the highest point of the tongue has a low back position. Thus, A is a low back vowel. It's also considered to be an open vowel, as our jaw is in a relatively open position when we say it. A, A. Now you may have noticed that most of the vowels are written in pairs. This indicates lip rounding. The vowel on the left side of the pair is unrounded, while the vowel on the right side is rounded. Thus, this high back vowel is pronounced while this high back vowel is pronounced u. Great, now that we have a basic understanding of the IPA vowel chart, let's start looking at Japanese vowels, as well as a few American English vowels. Note that we'll be doing this in phonetic order rather than alphabetical order. We'll start with E. Try saying it a few times.
E, 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 E.
Okada describes this as a high front vowel. Vance gives a similar description, noting that it has essentially the same quality as the vowel in me. Thus, if you're a native English speaker, you shouldn't have too much trouble with this one. It's pronounced E.
E, E, E.
Before moving on, however, let's take a minute to review vocal placement. Remember, Japanese is spoken with a relatively high pitch. Incidentally, in the previous lesson, I introduced this as an anecdotal theory, but since then, I've found an academic paper that definitively confirms the idea. According to Todaka, Japanese English bilingual speakers do use a higher pitch when speaking Japanese. Combine this with Noguchi's comments on resonance, and we're left with not E, but E. Moving on to E. Try shadowing.
E, 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 E.
This is a good example of a sound that native English speakers don't have too much difficulty producing, as it's within their vowel range, but one that doesn't exist as an independent sound in English. To be specific, it's quite similar to the vowel found in mess. But the tongue position is slightly higher and the mouth is just a bit more closed, as Vance notes. Combine this with neutral lips and appropriate vocal placement and we're left with E.
E, E, E.
Again, not but E. Great, let's try A.
A, 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 A.
This is another one that's in between American English vowels. According to Okada, A is a central low vowel. Vance describes the vowel in a similar way, noting that the tongue position is slightly more forward than the vowel found in father. I agree with this description and find that the difference between the two is quite noticeable. The Japanese sound is not A, but A.
あ、あ、あ.
As usual, the lip should be neutral, the pitch should be relatively high, and there should be little to no resonance. Ah. Okay, now, o.
お、お、お、お.
Okada describes this as a mid-back vowel. Vance agrees with this, noting that it's a bit higher than the vowel in moss. Now, Vance actually describes this vowel as weakly rounded. While I agree that O has more rounding than the other vowels, such as or I, I think it's critical to note that this is different than the type of rounding that we see in English or French, as the lips do not protrude. In other words, while the lips do round a little bit, they certainly do not stick out. So I think the term neutral lips is still appropriate for describing O to native English speakers who have the tendency to push their lips forward when they hear the words round your lips. Again, it's not O, but O.
お、お、お.
As usual, remember to apply Japanese vocal placement. O. Moving on to U.
う、う、う、う.
Okada describes this as a high back vowel. Vance describes the vowel in a similar way, but notes that the tongue is in a slightly more forward position than the vowel found in boot.
う、う.
As talked about earlier, the lip should be completely neutral while saying this vowel. There is no lip protruding or rounding. Vance talks a little bit about lip compression in his description of but also notes that lip compression becomes weaker or disappears entirely when speaking at a normal pace, so we won't worry about this phenomenon. Think about the vowel in U. Now, move the body of your tongue slightly forward and allow your lips to become neutral. U.
う、う、う.
As usual, speak in a relatively high pitch with little to no resonance. Alright, closing thoughts on the 5 Japanese vowels. As mentioned earlier, if you're a native speaker of American English, then these vowels are already within your vowel range. So as long as you listen very intently and realize that these sounds are often in between what you're used to saying, you should be able to pick them up relatively quickly through shadowing. Also remember neutral lips, high pitch, and little to no resonance. It's not a, I, U, E, O, but a, I, U, E, O.
あ、い、う、え、お、あ、い、う、え、お.
Incidentally, I found several useful videos on Japanese vowel pronunciation which I've linked below. I think the side shots of the tongue in the Japanese Pod 101 tutorial are particularly well done and can help with understanding of the IPA Vowel Chart. Furthermore, I think if you actively listen for it, you can clearly hear how the speaker's vocal placement is distinctly Japanese. The pitch is high and there's little to no resonance. As for the second video, note that the narrator accurately describes Japanese vowels as similar rather than identical to their English counterparts. Remember, besides I, the Japanese vowels all exist between American English vowels, though they all exhibit differences in pitch and resonance. Okay guys, that's all for this lesson. I hope that you found it useful. In the next episode, we'll be covering long vowels. As usual, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you very much for the continued support, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.